right, so hello everybody and welcome to Step-by-Step Improvisation over Standards. I am Willie Mayette, creator of JAZZEDGE, and this course is going to be live. We are going to have 15 lessons. This is lesson number 1 today. All right, so let's go through what we're going to be talking about and how this is going to roll. All right, so this live training is free to join, okay? If you just go back to JAZZEDGE.com/live, you'll see all the information and links. The resources and the replays are for members, so if you want the sheet music, the guides, all of that stuff, that's for members of either my Noble piano site or my JAZZEDGE site. Those two sites. If you're a member, then you can get all of these replays. I will have some more lower resolution replays on YouTube, but no sheet music and stuff like that. So if you want the full resources, that's where you're going to go. All right, all levels are welcome, but now the but is that this is really going to be more for intermediate level students moving to more advanced level as we go. But in the beginning, today's lesson, I'm really going to be laying out a plan of attack for you so you know exactly what it is that you need to do to start, improvisation at the piano, okay? So you're going to leave with that plan today, all right? So we're going to go through that today, and then you can ask your questions as you go. If you're joining me on YouTube Live, hello, and thank you for joining me. You can ask your questions there. I will check back there to see if there's any questions, and if you're on the webinar, just go ahead and click on that question button there or chat, and you can chat in your question as we go. The link again to register is jazzedge.com/live. All right, so today we're going to be, it's less going to be about playing and it's going to be more about organization. So I'm going to show you step by step what it is that you need to know before diving any deeper into this course, all right? So now if you don't like the sound of my voice or you don't like to hear me talk, then today's lesson ain't going to be for you. But if you're looking for a plan of attack for improvisation, I got to tell you, what I laid out for you today, I really think is some solid gold stuff, all right? So let's dive into it. Now, I've learned to improvise years and years and years ago, and I learned many different ways. I studied books, I studied with teachers. I mean, I had over a dozen different teachers. I went to college for this. So I've really seen a lot of curriculum and pedagogy revolving around improvisation. And then I started teaching young students how to improvise and absolute beginners how to improvise, wrote my whole Jazz Kids program. People still use that program. Teachers use that with their students. I mean, I've been doing this a long, long time and been doing it online for 20 years now. I started my first website in earnest in 2000. So we've been doing this online for 20 years. Really been doing this a long time. And what I've noticed that there are basically 2 layers that most teachers teach when it comes to improvisation. Number 1, you learn to improvise over the blues. And number 2, then you learn to improvise over standards. Now, typically within the layers, it's taught in 3 steps, and this is what I have found. Now, of course, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. You know, everyone teaches in their own way. I just think that there's a better way of doing it, which I'm going to explain to you. So the first step is typically you learn the form or you learn the progression, whatever it is, okay? So you learn some progression, and the progression is usually like 12 bars long or longer. All right, so it's typically when we're learning to improvise, we're given this long progression and long form that we need to improvise over. After that, we learn scales, right? Have you heard stuff like, oh, you use the Ionian scale on a major chord. You use your Mixolydian scale on a dominant chord. You can use a half-whole diminished scale or this scale or that scale. And this is what we call our chord-scale relationship. Nothing wrong with a chord-scale relationship, but I think it's a little bit putting the cart before the horse. And of course, step 3 is then you just go ahead and improvise. So typically, a teacher, from what I've seen over the years, I've been taught myself this way, and it took me a long time to learn the best way of teaching my students, right? Because what I learned is like, oh, okay, you start with the blues, right? Right, so you end up doing all of that, and that's all fine, but the problem is that there's a lot going on there, and it's typically difficult for students to jump right into improvisation like that. this is what I call the equivalent of, throwing them in the deep end of the pool, okay? You're just basically, here's chords, here's a scale, now go ahead and improvise. And you know what? The reality is this is not the best way to be set up for success. So I have found that students find a faster and longer lasting success by using a 6-layer approach. Let me go through that with you right now. So again, the typical 2 layers are you learn the blues and then you learn to improvise over standards, all right? And you apply some scales to the chords and then away you go. So my 6-layer approach starts with this. We first of all start with a very basic, simple progression. I'm going to go through all of this in just a second, all right? This is typically baseline accompaniment only. From there, then we learn a simple blues progression. Then we go to a more advanced blues progression. Then we move on to like cycle 4, 2-5-1 progressions. Then rhythm changes. And then finally, improvisation over easy standards, all right? So notice before we get to standards, we're doing a whole bunch more improvisation over easier forms. And this is going to be important, which you'll see. Now, I also have found it best to break that layer 1, all right, the layer 1, which is the simple progression, baseline, accompaniment only. I found that's best to break that down further into 5 steps. And those steps are this. We start with a simple accompaniment in the baseline or chords. I usually suggest starting with a simple bass line. Then we add some simple 5-finger scales to that. We learn some basic rhythms. We apply notes to those rhythms, and then we create licks and apply those over that simple bass line. Again, hang with me. I'm going to explain all of this as we go, just blasting through this right now quickly. All right? So up till this point, it's been a challenge to find, a clear path on my sites to learn improvisation. And the reason for that is I have a ton of content. There are over 700 hours of content on the JAZZEDGE site, and it continues to grow. So with that massive library, how do you find a path, right? It kind of is like this. Where do I start? And you got all these notes and everything all over the place, and it's all great, useful content, but it's sometimes a little bit disjointed for students, right? Now, in all fairness, I never designed the site to be, you do this lesson, then this lesson, then this lesson, then this lesson. And I need to explain really quickly why that is. You need to understand that every student is an individual. And even though you might say like, okay, well just, put up some beginner jazz stuff and an intermediate jazz stuff and advanced jazz stuff. Well, the problem is that not every student has the same idea of what jazz is. One student might think that, playing a rock tune in a jazz style is jazz, whereas another student thinks like, oh no, it has to be a Miles Davis tune in order for it to be jazz. Everybody has a different concept of what the word jazz means to them. Second of all, everybody has a different concept of what does it mean to be a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced level player. So anyway, the point is I can talk about that more, but to summarize, every student is an individual. And what I have found that works the best is here's a library, here are some suggestions, but if you really need more specific help for your specific needs, then join in on the coaching. And what I've done is on my sites, I've opened up coaching every single week now, right? So not only do you have coaching every Tuesday live with me, you can also do office hours, which I just did before coming on live for this class, every Wednesday. So Tuesday is coaching, Wednesday is office hours. You can ask me questions 2 days a week, every single week, right? Well, for the most part. Sometimes I take vacations or I'm out of town. But for the most part, it's every single week, Tuesday and Wednesday. So that's for my members of the site. All right, so where do I start? We are going to start with this. All right, I have created this step-by-step improvisation over standards beginner's guide, and I'm going to shift over to that right now. Now, this guide, all right, which let me just scroll through this real quick. You can see there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, and all of those, yellow things are links, and it takes you right to the site, right to the page where you need to go. So this guide is really a fantastic resource to have. So a couple of notes about this guide. Number one, this will be available to all members, so just be sure to go into the site and then go to the how to play jazz. Let me just go ahead real quick. And I'm going to show this to you. It's the step-by-step improvisation over standards course. So it looks like this. right? And then after the lesson is done today, I will be putting the lesson right in here, okay? Just click on that lesson, and you'll see the sheet music and the guide, and you can download the guide, all right? Now, that's the first thing. Second thing is, in order to go to the links in the guide, you just have to make sure that you're logged in on the site, all right? So just log in first, then you have the guide, and you can go to those links. All right, so let's go through this guide right now. Before you begin improvisation, you really need to, take to heart these 4, points here. Number 1, you have to have a belief that you can improvise, and you have to understand that it's going to take time. I suggest that you limit your expectations. If you think you're going to start off with like, if you think you're going to be improvising like that within 3 easy steps, then just go check out one of those other YouTube teachers that tells you like, hey, look, you're going to improvise in 3 easy steps, 5 minutes, and you got it. Because I could tell you for a fact, it ain't going to happen, all right? If you've never improvised before, that's not where you're going to get to within the first day or week or even month. It takes some time. Right? So you just have to realize that, and I want to make sure that your expectations are, you're not setting the bar too high for yourself. Number 2, you need to know how to play some scales in the right hand. And this is really just like your major and minor 5-finger scales. At least if you could do that, then you could start improvising. So that's your typical C major 5-finger scale and C minor 5-finger scale. Right? So C major and C minor. Right? The next thing is you have to have some basic rhythms under your belt. I'm going to show you places in which you can get all of this information. But basic rhythms like quarter notes, eighth notes. You should know quarter notes and eighth notes. If you don't know that those terms are like, whoo, going right over your head, then you got to get into that before you actually get into improvisation. And then the last thing is you need to have some basic left hand technique to be able to play a steady bass line. So as long as you could do your 5-finger scale in your left hand as well, then you're all set. Now, I typically teach, like, in my core piano and 30-day playbook, I really suggest that students, especially at the beginner level, be learning that 5-finger major and 5-finger minor scales. It's a great way of warming up your fingers and building up some technique. So make sure that you go through that, and then you'll be all set. All right, so now let's talk about the improvisation layers. There are basically, like I said, 6 layers to improvisation. We've gone over this. Simple bass line, over a simple blues, an advanced blues, cycle 4 and 2-5-1 progressions, then rhythm changes, and then finally standards. Okay. Now, there is a very specific reason why I have found that these 6 layers work the best. And that's because typically if we just started right in on a simple blues, say, okay, that's immediately a 12-bar blues progression, right? So that's 12 measures right there in which you need to improvise over, and typically what happens to students is they lose the form, right? So halfway through the form, they're like, oh, where am I? What measure am I on? Okay, so we really want to start with something that is such a basic, simple form that you're not going to lose it. Because when it comes to improvisation, the left hand has to be locked in, right? And that means that the left hand has to know the progression, has to know the form, has to be steady, and cannot lose the form. Because if you need to focus on like where you are and making sure that the left hand is steady and you're focusing on the left hand, then there's no way you're going to be able to improvise effectively with the right hand. Reason for that is that you literally cannot think of 2 things at the same time. I know we talk about multitasking and stuff like that, but in reality, we switch back and forth, our brain switches back and forth between the left hand and right hand so fast that it seems like we're thinking about both simultaneously, but we're really not, all right? So if we need to focus on the left hand, then the right hand shouldn't be improvising. Focus on the left hand, get that down first. Once you're steady there, then you could start to improvise in the right hand. All right, now before we begin to improvise over standards, be sure to master these lessons and courses, okay? So here's our beginner guide right now. All right, so the first thing is you start by learning what is improvisation. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on here, and you're going to see that this is going to go right in. It's going to load right up to the site, okay? And then you can just go ahead and click play on that video, and away you go. Living, all right? So, and then there you go. So this guide makes it very, very simple for you to just be able to kind of follow this down and then just click on these links, right? So what I want to do though is I want to just more a high level go through each one of these. So what is improvisation? That video will explain all of it to you. Now, I do want to, I know I'm talking a lot, I know I'm talking kind of fast, but I do want to just pause for 1 second and explain to you the reason that I'm giving you all of this is that I don't want to teach you the same material that I have taught so many times. There is such a massive amount of information on beginning improvisation and intermediate level improvisation at the JAZZEDGE site that it doesn't require me to teach all of this stuff again. And a lot of times in these courses, what I've done is I've kind of started with all of this stuff again and showed it to you in a different way. I'm not going to do that now. So that's why today's lesson is really about getting you prepared so that when we get started tomorrow, it's like, bam, we're getting right into improvisation. So if all of this that I mentioned today makes sense to you, you feel good about it, then tomorrow's lesson is going to be great for you. If not, then you hold off on tomorrow's lesson and instead you work on what I'm giving you today first, right? Now, like I said, there will be time for questions at the end, so be sure to ask your questions as you go and I'll answer them at the end. All right, so then we learn about what improvisation is. Next, we start improvising using a simple accompaniment with the notes C, E, F, and G, all right? So this is this simple bass line, all right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to all right, so we're just going to improvise using our 5-finger scale and that simple bass line down there in the left hand. That's all right here, and this is all part of the 30-day playbook, okay? So you just click right there, and it will take you to that lesson to learn all of that. Step 3, we then move to a minor bass line. All right, and then we do some simple licks in the right hand. We can use our 5-finger blues scale, we can use our 5-finger minor scale, or we can even use the first 4 notes of the minor pentatonic scale. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, that's that fingering. 5-finger blues scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-finger minor scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be, there's the 5-finger minor scale, blues scale. Or pentatonic. Okay. Now, this course, Improvise in 30, or I'm sorry, this lesson rather, Improvise in 30, is a great lesson. Now, it's an older lesson of mine, but it teaches you all of that minor bass line and how to improvise over it, and it follows my Jazz Kids approach. So it's a very, very nice resource. Now, you see in number 4 here, anytime I suggest a specific lesson or course, I suggest that you do that entire lesson and not just a few chapters of it. So right there, it might mean that these first few steps might take you a week to go through. Absolutely fine, nothing wrong with it. But when you're taking a look at the lesson or the course or whatever the suggestion is, take a look at it. If you want it first, you can kind of breeze through it. Remember, on my videos on my site, you can change the speed so you can make it so they go twice as fast. So if I'm talking too much for you, I'll talk a little bit faster, and you can kind of see, like, do I need this or not, right? But this is the order that you do it in. So when you take a look at number 1, what is improvisation? If you start listening to it and you're like, hey, I got all this stuff, I don't need this. All right, then skip down to step 2. All right, can you do that? If you could do that, fine. Now skip down to step 3, all right? Now I'll do it with the minor bass line, and so on, okay? And then the same thing with these chapters in here. In Improv in 30, if you take a look at it and you're like, oh, I got all that stuff, I'm fine, then skip down to step 5. All right, so next we do an extended bass line using the Kimmy So Cool bass line, and that's this. Now you can learn the song so you can learn, there's the song, okay, so you can learn the song, But really what we're focusing on is improv, so we're really going to be focusing on playing this bass line while improvising in the right hand, okay? Now, step 6 here, we need to make sure that we know these scales. There are basically 5 scales that we should know. There's the 5-finger major scale, C 5-finger major scale. There's the C minor 5-finger scale. There's the C blues 5-finger scale. Right? Now all the 5-finger scales, the fingering is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the fingering is always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a 5-finger scale. The other one is the full blues scale. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'll tell you, I see some teachers teach it like this, like 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. My suggestion is you don't do that because you're going to notice like when you start to play this fast, it's real easy to make mistakes on that because the distance. See how there you have a minor third, there's a half step. Excuse me. So the fingering for the C blues scale, at least, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Right? So you need to know the C blues scale, and that's the full blues scale. I also suggest that you learn the C harmonic minor scale. This is a nice scale to improvise over, over that minor blues and that minor, bass line from Kimmy So Cool, right? So that's a good one as well, that C harmonic minor scale. That one's a little bit more advanced though, so if you don't know that one, that's not a deal breaker. Now, if you need scale help, the 2 lessons, courses that I would suggest is take a look at Piano Essentials, right? This is a big course. There's Piano Essentials Beginner and Piano Essentials Advanced. And in fact, down here, I put in the link to the Beginner and Advanced. This is just to the Beginner one, I believe, all right? But definitely take a look at the Piano Essentials course. And the other one is the Warm-Ups and Improvisation. There's some really good stuff in there for scale help, all right? Now, step 7, you need to make sure that you feel comfortable with rhythm. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with rhythm, there are a couple of things that I would suggest that you do. First of all, take a look at the simple rhythms in the 30-day playbook. Then the next step is take a look at the 2-hand rhythms in Improvise in 30, okay? And if we just take a quick peek at this, I'll load that up. While that's loading up, I'll move down. The No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano. These rhythms are great to look at as well. And, of course, the Rhythm Essentials course. This is like a deep dive into rhythm. So here's the Improvise in 30 sheet music, and you'll see like the different rhythms we got going on here, these different 2-handed rhythms. These would be fantastic for you to go through as well, all right? Now you might see some stuff like this, like these little disc icons. This was an older book that actually had a CD in it, but I do have these Jazz Kids lessons on my JAZZEDGE site, so just make sure that you do a search for Jazz Kids and that will come up. All right, so now, let me just review real quick up to this point, all right? So what you should be able to do, because I've kind of blasted through a lot, at this point, by the time we get to step 8, I should feel comfortable playing that C major, simple bass line, and then doing some simple improv using my C major 5-finger scale. I should then also be able to go to the minor one, be able to play some improv using the C minor 5-finger scale or the blues, right, or minor pentatonic, whatever it is, right? And then after that, then I move on to this Kimmy So Cool. Now that's a bit of a jump. Now, as you can see, like we were doing 4 notes here, and now we're doing many more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, so we're doubling the amount of notes that we need to learn, and it's a little bit more active of a bass line. But it's still within reason that you should then be able to go from this into this. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're comfortable doing that. All right, so it's improvising using the 5-finger blues scale along with that bass line. Right? Now, like I said, we should also know these scales. okay? And you should also feel relatively comfortable putting some of these rhythms together with these notes to create the licks. Now, all of that rhythm together with the notes to create the licks, that's all in these lessons that I am recommending to you. So these lessons will teach you all of that process, right? Now, I also want to speak to my more intermediate to advanced level players. Some of these bass lines are kind of nice to have under your fingertips, like a... So you learn these chords along with that, with Kimmy's So Cool. So don't think that this is all just like beginner easy stuff that, you know, I don't need to learn it. It's actually not a bad idea. There's some good stuff in there for you to learn. All right, now step 8. We're now going to move outside of that simple, form, like 2 measures, and start to move into a larger form. This is where now we are moving to that layer 2. All right, let me go back to this here again. Okay. So remember in layer 2, we started to go to our simple blues progression. So right now, everything that we've done has been this. It's been that simple progression, bass line accompaniment only, improv with the right hand. Now we're moving into that blues progression, and what I would suggest, the best place to start with that is that No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano. All right, so take a look at that beginner course of the No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano. That goes through just a whole bunch of great stuff for learning how to improvise over the blues. Now, we're going to move in step 9 away from bass lines to now chords in the left-hand accompaniment. And I would suggest that you start with your block chords, okay, your basic 7th chords. And that is right here, lesson 2 and lesson 3 in that No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano. So just click on those links to go right to that lesson. Next, we're going to move to chord shells, all right? And then that's lesson number 4, chord shells, again in that No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano, right? So now, at this point, you can continue working through the rest of the No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano beginner course. Would not be the worst thing for you to do, right? Especially if you're kind of brand new to improvisation, that would be good for you to do, right? Now, at this point, we should have a bass line or bass lines, right? We should also know our 7th chords and know how to play those over the blues while doing some improvisation. Again, just improvising using 5-finger scales, that's fine, or you could use the entire blues scale. That is enough for right now, okay? There's some other stuff that you can add in, which you'll learn in those courses, but if you don't want to go through all of that, you could just stick with that 5-finger blues scale. That's enough to start with for now. But anyway, you have the bass lines, you have the chords in the left hand, and then we also have chord shells. So now you have 3 different accompaniment technique patterns that you can use in the left hand. This is very important because when we sit down and we want to improvise, say over a C blues, yeah, maybe we start with shells. But then maybe we go into a bass line. Maybe we don't want to play that much, we want to go easier. Now the beauty is that everything you've learned, step 1 through 9 here that I've laid out for you, all works together. All of the left hand patterns work together. Everything that you learn in the right hand works with what you're playing in the left hand. So that means that you could go from this bass line into this, or back into this, or into this. Or into this. So you could do 7th chords, you could do chord shells, you could do bass lines. All of it works together. And if you really want to make sure that you own this material, you should be able to do what I just did. Go from one bass line into another bass line, into chords. You should be able to do that relatively without losing the beats, okay? So that's all still relatively simple layers, okay? So we're just right here on layer 1 and layer 2, okay? So we've done layer 1 and layer 2. All right, so now at this point, once you know how to play those chords of the blues along with simple improvisation, you can move back to playing bass lines. It's also a great idea to move between both major and minor blues. Again, this is all in the No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano beginner course, okay? All right, so again, now let's kind of figure out where we're at here. Step 11. At this point, you should know how to, number 1, improvise over a simple 4-note bass line, like we just said, using 5-finger scales. You should feel comfortable creating licks and playing them over those accompaniments. You should know your simple blues form and be able to play chords, shells, or a bass line. Okay, in the left hand along with improv in the right hand. Now, if not, then go back and review steps 1 through 10, right? All right, so now, step 12. After you can improvise over that basic blues progression using 7th chords and shells and simple bass lines, now it's time that we want to move to a more advanced bass line. And all of that is in the No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano Advanced course, okay? So if you did the beginner course, then you can then move from the beginner course right into the advanced course, right? That's step 12, is learning that more advanced. That more advanced sounding blues, and then learning, your rootless chords. All of that is in that advanced No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano course. Now, in step 13, what we want to do is now we want to shift our focus up. Well, actually, what I should say is up to this point, what have we done? We've played an accompaniment, either it be a bass line, shells, 7th chords, rootless chords, whatever it is. We've played some accompaniment in the left hand. It's been over either a simple accompaniment or a simple blues or layer 3, a more advanced, extended blues progression. Okay, so that's what we've been improvising over. In the right hand, we've been using basically scales to improvise. And we would take the blues scale or whatnot and just create licks and start to just improvise over that scale, all right? And either it be the full scale, the 5-finger scale, any of those 5-finger scales. So basically, scalar improvisation in the right hand, all right? So that's where we're at this point. Now what we want to do is we want to shift our focus so that our improvisation starts to get a little bit more targeted, okay? And now what I mean by that is, and this is important, say it's a more targeted approach which will help you develop your own personal improvisational style, right? Because when we sit down and I'm going to play let's say I'm going to play my 4 to the floor with my 7th chords. I mean, so I could do that. That's my, improvisation over the blues. But what you notice is that it doesn't sound all that interesting, does it? All right? It sounds kind of flat, right? I think that would be a fair thing to say. So the reason for that is that all I'm focusing on is playing the chords, and I play them in time. I played the form, as I should. But I'm focusing on just playing that form in the chords and then playing a scale in the right hand. I'm really not shaping my improvisation. And that's really what we're going to talk about in step 13. So in order to shape your improvisation, there are basically 4 things I would suggest. Number 1, you want to understand and start to utilize guide tones, right? So they help you to really, lock in and define the progression and the harmony, all right? So that means so there I'm really focusing on trying to get to my guide tones, utilizing my guide tones in my improvisation. And you'll hear that it's not so scalar, but it defines my harmony, all right? And then this lesson right here, you know, just click there and like it'll take you to the lesson, and that explains it in much more detail. Also, check out this practice session, guide tones and rootless chords. Great stuff right there. I put that in there for you. Enclosures are where we have like our chord tones, and we do different neighbor notes and enclosures to get to those chord tones. For instance, like a half above, half below. So now I'm like, so now you can start to hear. You can hear all these different ways in which I can now start to approach these guide tones by utilizing my enclosures. A lot of great stuff there. The basics of improvisation lesson is great for, gives you some different rhythms, gives you some enclosures, gives you, improvising over 1 and 2 measure 2-5-1 progression. So a real nice lesson. It's an older lesson, all right, but still valuable material and very easy to follow. The next thing is scale accents. So this is where now we start to Now here, what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to accent different notes within the scale to make them pop a little bit more. A great example of this is if I were to read this sentence, I'm going to read this sentence 2 ways. Accents make your solo sound less monotone and boring, improvisation 101 course, right? Okay, so that's one way of saying it. Or I could say accents make your solo sound less monotone and boring, improvisation 101 course, right? Now, obviously, that's a little ridiculous the way I said it, but you get the point. By accenting like certain words, I'm able to keep your attention a little bit better. We all had that teacher at some point in our life, and then the square root of 3, it's like, oh man, like you just zone out, and that same thing is going to happen with your improvisation. It doesn't matter what you're playing. Right? So I mean, like, the improvisation is very flat there, whereas if I start to do, right? Now it starts to sound a little bit more interesting. Now, obviously, that's not just accenting the scale. You can kind of hear some of the articulation, the rhythm, and stuff like that, and that's where step 4 comes in, the rhythm and articulation. All right, so in step 13, this is now where we start to develop and move our third layer, all right? So we're moving our third layer here, our advanced blues progression, okay? Or we could say we're taking all 3 of these layers, right? And now we're starting to add a little bit of spice to those layers, okay? Still, before we get into improvisation over standards, okay? All right, so that's step 13. 14, now you want to learn both cycle 4 and 2-5-1 motion. Is important, especially for jazz improv. And these lessons are all from the course Improvisation Essentials Beginner. All right, take a look at cycle 4 motion, the improv pattern, 2-5-1 progressions and voicings, and then 2-5-1 progressions with arpeggios. All right, those lessons, that's the next layer. All right, so once you can improvise, right, over the advanced blues progression, now we want to start to improvise and understand our cycle 4 and 2-5-1 progression. Cycle 4 is... Right, so we've heard that sound before, like F to B flat, E flat to A flat, D flat to G flat. All right, we've heard all of that sound before, so now it's a matter of understanding it and being able to improvise over it. And in that Improvisation Essentials, there's some great lessons there that give you some cool patterns to work on for your improvisation. So some really good exercises there. All right, so now, finally, step 15, if you have not been working on Piano Essentials Beginner and Advanced, you definitely should. You've got to make sure that you know your scales, okay? You really have to understand and know how to play most of your 12 major scales before you get into improvisation over standards, okay? Scales are critical for improvisation, and another great lesson is mastering your scales. It's packed with some great exercises to help you master scales that you already know. And then for chords, I have this master every chord of the piano using this exercise. That's a great lesson, and it's worth a look. There's some good stuff in there, and also has my randomization sheets, all right? And the final thing in the guide is, here are the different lessons and courses mentioned, all right? So you can kind of go through this, and this is just kind of a nice little link guide here for that, all right? All right, so now, that's a lot of information, right? And then that's a lot of stuff that you really need to learn before we get into improvising over standards. So what we really need to know before getting into improv over standards is at least those four, okay? Because if you don't understand those 4 layers, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be able to improvise over a standard, okay? And let me just freely explain some of the stuff that you absolutely need to have under your fingertips, right? When you're going to take a standard, like, we're going to be working through Easy Living here, okay? So when you're going to take a standard like Easy Living or whatnot, there can't be any question about the chords, all right? So if I pull up, let's see if I still have it pulled up here in iReal Pro. Yeah, that's rhythm changes. Let me pull up Easy Living. Okay, so here's my iReal Pro app. Well, not my iReal Pro app. I didn't make the app, but I purchased it and downloaded it. I suggest you do the same thing. It's a good app. All right, so when you take a look at this, right? So if you can't go through and play it with chord shells or rootless chords or whatever, then you have no business improvising over it, okay? So I try and give you the no bull, approach to this. So don't get offensive if I tell you you have no business doing this. But the reality is, if you're watching this, you're interested in learning how to improvise over standards, right? So if you want to know how to improvise over standards, then you have to do all of those other steps that I suggested first. Simple bass line, right? With improv, bass line, like a little bit more extended. You could also do the Learn Jazz Piano Today bass line. That's a good one as well. The No Bull Guide to Jazz Piano, all of that stuff. All of that you want to do first. You want to know how to improvise over a blues. You want to feel comfortable with that. You want to feel comfortable with chord shells. You want to feel comfortable understanding what cycle 4 motion is. You also want to understand like what a 2-5-1 progression is, and also how to get some basic improvisation over that 2-5-1 progression, right? So those are the steps that you want to go through first before jumping into standards. Because once you jump into standards, there's a lot of chords. I mean, look at this tune. You got 2 chords per measure, sometimes 3 chords a measure. That's a lot to improvise over. And the question that I normally get from students is, how do I improvise over chords when they're moving so fast like this? Okay? And then the first answer is, well, or the first question I should say is, can you improvise over a blues effectively? Can you improvise over a 2-5-1 progression effectively? Can you improvise over cycle 4 motion effectively? Do you know your scales, right? Do you know how to play chord shells in the left hand? If the answers to any of those are no, then you don't really have a fighting chance of being able to improvise over standards. So you've got to get all of that stuff together first. And this is why this guide here is just absolutely critical to you, right? So you want to make sure you log in, download this guide, go through this, and make sure that you really understand all of this. Now, where we're going to be moving on this is, now I'm going to move forward in this course with the assumption that you've gone through that guide. and with the assumption that you already know how to improvise over a blues, that I don't have to explain to you how to make basic rootless chords or chord shelves, that when it comes to the left hand, that you already know how to create chords in the left hand, right? So we're going to be getting into, starting to improvise using some basic shells to start with first, and then maybe doing some rootless chords, doing that kind of stuff as well. We'll be doing that, but the chords are going to be less of the issue in this course. What's going to be more of the focus is really, well, what do we start to do with the right hand to start to build out a solo, right? And that's where we're going to be moving, in the course. All right, so now, at this point, questions. Let me see if I got any questions already written in. Okay. Yes, a couple of questions. Yeah, okay, so it's funny, I'm on YouTube. So let me reply to Paul, Mina, Storm. My God, this is just a sales pitch. It keeps referring to the online course. Well, number one, I put a lot of time and effort into this. So, yeah, I don't give everything away for free, and I certainly hope that nobody would expect any artist to give away all of their work for free. So I'm not suggesting that you're saying that, but we need to start there first. The reason that, I think I was also very clear at the beginning here, that this is really going to be more about talking and really getting you prepared, right? So it's less about, this is how you improvise, right? Today's lesson is, what's critical about today's lesson is that this lays it all out for you. So you have the guide now, right now. If you want to learn to improvise, do the steps that I gave you right here. The guide, the reason I put the guide together is because now it's easy for you to download. You don't have to figure out what order it is. There it is. Just literally go down the list, click on it, open up the video, watch it, get the sheet music, and then learn it from there, all right? So moving forward, it's going to be all about improvisation. But we have to start with a baseline. And like I said, I don't want to go through and constantly keep teaching you the same stuff. We see this all the time. How many times do we have to learn how to play a C major triad or an F major triad or a simple bass line or here's a blues? I've done it. I've done it literally dozens of times on the site. So that's why I'm going through and explaining all of that and giving you all of that stuff. Laura's asked, I'm sorry, any specific standards that you will cover? Yes, I'm going to be covering easy living, and I'm also going to be covering my romance. Since I have a lesson on my romance on the site, we'll do improv for my romance and also easy living as well. And then time permitting, we might move on to another standard as well. All right, let's see. Let me take a look at the chat here on Zoom. Looking forward to these sessions. Is this all located in the JAZZEDGE? I can't see what that says. JAZZEDGE? Or is there a website that we can go to? No, all of this is going to be at JAZZEDGE.com, all right? So if you're a No Bowl piano member or you're a JAZZEDGE member, then you will have access to this course. The course will be right in the courses area at JAZZEDGE.com. Sasha, this is so helpful. Really step-by-step structure I needed. Thank you, Sasha. I appreciate that. Desmond, confused. So all these things we should take a look at are accessible to us, or do they all need payment first? No, if you're a member of the site, then you have access to all of that stuff. In fact, I'm not sure if every lesson that I recommended is available to No Bowl piano members. You might need to be a full JAZZEDGE member. But most of the main stuff that I recommended is available to No Bowl piano members and, of course, JAZZEDGE members, all right? If you are one of my Piano with Willie Legacy members, a lot of this stuff is already on the Piano with Willie site. You would just have to find it on the Piano with Willie site. This course is not going onto the Piano with Willie site. I'm not adding new courses right now to the Piano with Willie site. I've already added new courses a little while ago to that site. So this course is just going to live at JAZZEDGE, and it's going to be for JAZZEDGE and No Bowl piano members. I've only been doing homeschool piano. Any ideas and how I could advance? All right, so homeschool piano is my site that's perfect for absolute beginners. A lot of the beginner improvisation stuff that I talked about earlier on today, the basic bass lines and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff is already found in Homeschool Piano. So if you're already a member of Homeschool Piano and that's working for you and that's the right speed, I would stay there and finish out that program first before moving over to JAZZEDGE. Now, if you're an absolute beginner, you could start over at JAZZEDGE as well. There's nothing wrong with that, all right? It's just you have access to a lot of stuff. The thing that's nice about Homeschool Piano is it kind of gives you access to a smaller, more focused, there's quizzes, and like it's very step-by-step, right? And it's very much, Homeschool Piano was designed to be this, then this, then this, then this. And that's why there's 18 units. JAZZEDGE is not 18 units. It's like 1,800 units, all right? There's a ton of content there. It was not designed to be step-by-step like that. However, utilizing the guide that I have here, you could go through this, and then it is step-by-step for you. So it's up to you. Thierry, great stuff, Willie. Do you suggest to work on the course while working on the blues improv in parallel? For you, you absolutely could. You're at the level in which you could. Every student has to ask this question of themselves, and that is, am I motivated still? Am I passionate about this? Am I having fun with this? All right, or is this too much? If you're getting frustrated, then you're likely doing too much. And at that point, you should pull back and just focus on one thing, right? But if you're like more of an intermediate to advanced level student like Thierry is, then yeah, you could be doing your blues improv while also focusing on jazz improv over standards. But the question that you would want to ask yourself, Thierry, and anyone else would want to ask themselves is, if you like the sound of the blues, then maybe that's where you stay right now. I just did my how to play slow blues piano course at JAZZEDGE that just was released last month. That's a big course with a lot of material there. Maybe you go through that first and really get down all that slow blues stuff, because there's quite a bit of information in there to pick out of there. So maybe you do that first. Because I know some students, they really like the sound of the blues. And if you like the sound of the blues, well, then moving over to standards is going to be more like... it's going to be more stuff like that, and maybe that's not the sound that you're looking for. So if you don't like that sound of jazz standards and jazz improv, then stick with the blues. Where can I find these notes? All of this is going to be in the course. This will all be in the course. So when you log in at JAZZEDGE, you go to courses and you're going to see a course. It's actually up there right now. It's empty, but the course is there. And it says step-by-step improvisation over standards. And then this lesson today will be in that course within about an hour after we're done. Sasha, great question. How does Ben's Blues fit into this? So Ben's Blues works well anytime you're doing the, So you could put Ben's Blues right here in step 6, all right? So right after step 6, right in here, okay? Right after Kimmy's So Cool. And also, it works well along with that No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano Beginner course. I kind of mention it in that course as well. So Ben's Blues can really fit anywhere in here, like step 7, step 8, step 9, and anywhere in there you could throw in Ben's Blues. The only reason I didn't add it in here is because it's really, like, a lot of that stuff is already touched upon in those other lessons. So I felt as though it would be more of a, more redundant, okay? But there's a lot of great information in that Ben's Blues course, but I think now the No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano kind of supersedes the Ben's Blues course in terms of step-by-step improvisation. So, Mike said playing over 2 5s, okay. Missed the first half, would there be a repeat? Yes. Mike Fritz, no, it's not a sales pitch, rude comment for any guy who has worked hard for 20 years. Thank you, I appreciate that, Mike. Leslie, and boy, I'll tell you, one thing I got to say, and I love calling out people on, anywhere online, because there's always people that want to bring you down, right? I've learned to get a thicker skin. Of course I get affected by it because I'm a human being like anybody else, you know? It's like anytime someone's going to be rude to you, we always want to say, oh yeah, it doesn't affect me. But come on, we all know at some level it always affects us at some level. I've learned to like kind of blow that stuff off a little bit more. But I've also learned to call it out because guess what? That kind of behavior really has no place for us as artists, all right? If you don't like what somebody's playing artistically or you don't like what they're doing, you don't like what they're selling, then get the off, all right? Then don't listen anymore, all right? Same thing with like, you know, I see like, you know, I'll go to like a Keith Jarrett or Brad Mehldau or Oscar Peterson video and there's thumbs down. Why in God's name would you ever thumb down one of those? Why? Because you don't like the sound of what it is they're doing? These are masters of their instrument, right? So the audacity to like even do that, it's just, once again, and especially what we see right now is going on in the world. There's always people, there's always going to be haters. So, and I bring that up, and I don't bring that up because I'm like, oh, like a wilting flower about it, but I bring it up because it's so important because when students are trying to learn to improvise, they get so scared off because of those haters, right? We're so worried that like, oh, like people aren't going to like it. I spent the first 30 years of my life learning this instrument and focusing so much on, well, what are other musicians going to think about my playing? Until finally I was 30 years old and I was like, forget it. I just don't care what other musicians think of my playing. I'm going to play how I play. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, then don't listen to what I have to, you know, what I'm playing. Right? So that's such an important thing when it comes to improvisation. I'm so happy to say that in my group coaching every week, we have such a great core group of students that are so supportive of one another. And that's really what you're wanting. And everybody that's a hater, I hate to tell you, they're not going to make it in music, right? Because they're just not going to get that far in music because that's the wrong attitude, right? We want to have this positive attitude and we want to really bring people up rather than trying to take them down. Oh, all right. Michael Omega. This is very... actually, hold on. Sorry, I missed it, so I'll get to that in a second. All right, Leslie, I'm a member of Piano with Willie. Is this course? No. Okay, it's not going to be on there. But you can join me live, and then you can get all of this information live. All right? So that is something you can do. Blown over 251 changes, Mike said. Is always a challenge. I usually just use a major scale over 2/5, but sounds lame. Yeah, so what you want to do is take a look at the Improvisation Essentials. Take a look at the 251. Utilizing the arpeggios there will help, but then also as we start to get into some of these other scales, there's a great lesson I did, 8 scales you must know for improvisation. Utilizing that altered scale over the 5 chord, that's a real nice sound, or a half whole diminished scale over the 5 chord, another nice sound. All right, so Michael said, Willie, iReal Pro can work on a Windows 10 desktop by operating via A+ Android simulator program, similar to BluesTack. I'm on the process of installing the 2 programs on my desktop. All right, let me know how that goes because that would be fantastic. Where can I get the sheet music with all the links? I'm a member of Noble Piano. Do I have access to this lesson? Yes. Okay, so if you're a member of Noble Piano or JAZZEDGE, you will have access to all of the replays of the lessons in this course as well as all of the music. Now remember, I do the lesson live at 2 p.m. Eastern, so I have to actually do the lesson before it's available. Then once I'm done, I take that recording and I put it up onto the site. So it usually takes a couple of hours before it gets onto the site, but it's usually there by the end of day on the day that I do the lesson. All right. William Weathers, Willie, fantastic, just what I need. Question, are all of the URLs mentioned in the levels today accessible if you're a Noble Piano member? Yes, I believe most of them are, at least most of the critical ones are, all right? So I think that you have access to most of those lessons as a Noble Piano member. There may be 1 or 2 that's only a JAZZEDGE only, but for the most part, most of it is going to be available to Noble Piano members. Joe asks, I'd really love to learn the rhythms to play in the right hand. I understand the chords in the left hand, even though I can't play them. Is the right hand I'm looking forward to? Oh, okay, yeah. So the improv in 30 lesson, that would be a great one for you to take a look at, especially those two-handed rhythms, where you'll be playing one rhythm in the left hand and another rhythm in the right hand. That would be fantastic for you. And like I said, if you want a deep dive in rhythm, take a look at the Rhythm Essentials course. Max had a question, a comment on YouTube. This is a great extension of Summer Piano Jam and Ben's Blues. Nice format. Thank you very much, Max. I appreciate it. And yes, you're right. My Summer Piano Jam program and Ben's Blues, this works perfectly in there. Doug had a question: how to combine all kind of sequence rhythm, so rhythm flow. Well, again, that's where, like, if you're asking that question, I would go through these steps first, because a lot of that is kind of covered and embedded in here. So these 15 steps here, okay, are really, really kind of critical. And my Improv Essentials course, that goes through a lot of, that stuff as well. There's sequencing and different, patterns that you can learn from there. So I would definitely suggest taking a look at that course. Piano Willie do not have access, so if we haven't already finished the pre-steps, this course isn't for us. Yes. All right, this course is not going on to Piano Willie, at least not at this point. If it does go on, it's going to be weeks from now before this course shows up on Piano Willie, and I'm not even sure it's even going to show up there at all, okay? However, if you want to upgrade to JAZZEDGE, I'm going to be running a special this month, all right? So just, check your email, and I'll be mentioning it on this live lesson as well. So just look for that. There will be a special for that. So again, I see a lot of the questions, where do I get the guide that you're referencing? So what will happen is, like I said, today you will, so what you'll do is you go into, log into JAZZEDGE, and you're going to see a course, right? And it's right here. Step-by-step improvisation over standards. So you click in there. Now, right now, there's nothing in there, okay, because I haven't added this lesson. So you're going to see this lesson number 1, and it's going to say something like beginner's guide, right? And then once you see that, over here it'll say sheet music, and then just click on that, and you'll be able to download the guides, all right? Gary said, I like your approach. Well done. Are your exercises transcribed in all 12 keys? No, not all of them. Some stuff is transcribed in all 12 keys, but when we do like the Improvisation Essentials, that I believe is in all 12 keys, like the cycle 4 motion and some of those things are in all 12 keys or in multiple keys. When we obviously do like a standard, it's going to be in whatever key it's in. I'm not going to transpose the improvisation to all 12 keys, but it's a great thing for you guys to work on. Terry, if you're a non-member of the site, believe me, there are tons of great stuff there. I'm a student for years. Willie's a super knowledgeable teacher. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. Arshia, and I'm sorry that I have to like my computer is over there and I need to like figure out some system here to get it, like maybe I'll have my iPad or something, so forgive me for like leaning in here. So I could play the bass line, but when I try to improvise using my right hand, I just can't play it together. All right, so then you're at that level, you're still in that beginner guide, all right? And then I just want to make sure you guys understand, when I say beginner, I don't mean that you're like you're not that kind of beginner. You're a beginner to improvisation, and there's nothing wrong with being a beginner to improvisation. I'm a beginner to many things as well, right? Like if I wanted to learn, Russian, like all I know how to say is spasiba, and I can barely say здравствуйте, which is hello, which, is always difficult for me to say, right? So I'm an absolute beginner when it comes to learning Russian. I don't feel like any, I'm not upset about that. So don't be upset if I say beginner. I just mean a beginner to improvisation. So you want to go through that beginner guide first. The playing hands together, I got to tell you, that No Bull Guide to Jazz Piano, the beginner one, there's a ton of content in there. If you just really follow that and practice that, you're going to get it down, hands together, right? Absolutely. And if you find that like doing a bass line, like, whatever the bass line is, and then improvising over it is too difficult for you, you can't get it hands together, then that means you need to go back to the basic bass line, right? Again, this is so important here, all right? This. So many students just want to just kind of blast through this. You got to start with that simple progression first, and then be able to improvise over that. So as silly as it is to as silly as it is just to play that simple bass line in the left hand, you might feel like, oh, well, that's not, advanced enough for me. Well, sure, I get it. But that's where you start. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to do anything more advanced than that. I guarantee it, all right? So if you can't do that, then forget trying to improvise over the full blues or a more advanced bass line. It's just not going to work for you. So you have to make sure that you start there first, and that's why all of that is within that guide, all right? That's why we start right up here with this, simple accompaniment, improv in 30, right? Let me see the video again. Yes, anything we could do after this session to prepare for tomorrow's session? Yeah, Sam, download this guide and just read through it and make sure that you're kind of a thumbs up on most of this stuff. Now for you, I've seen some of your stuff, so I think that for you, you're okay, right? You might find that you're a little deep into the pool when we start tomorrow, but I think that you'll be able to hang with it. But a good way to get started with this is just download this guide after I upload it, after the session here, right? Like I said, give me about an hour, and download this and just go through this and make sure that you really kind of understand all this stuff. Remember, I would go into these courses, right, or lessons or chapters, take a look at the sheet music too. That's always a great way of knowing, do I know what's going on here? Or whoa, wait a second, this is way over my head. And if that's the case, then you can watch the video and see how the video, ties in with the sheet music. Victoria, Willie, this is worth its weight in gold. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wouldn't mind my weight in gold. Yeah. Idea is great. Nice roadmap to get where I want to get to. I've been trying to find a local teacher that have a plan like this, comprehensive. Great addition to the site. Thank you very much, David. Tell it, brother. You're right. All right. Troll is a troll. Yeah, I know. But you know what? See, the problem is with trolls is they don't get called out enough. And that's where I'm that's where I get tired, is that, especially when it comes to art. If you don't like art, then just keep your mouth shut, all right? Everybody thinks that their opinion about a piece of art is like everybody needs their opinion, and that's worth everything. You know what? I don't like a lot of the music that the kids listen to. But you know what? It's not garbage. They like it. They enjoy it. So if they listen to it, they enjoy it, then who am I to say that that's crappy music, all right? The other thing, too, this is a nice exercise. Take a piece of music that you don't like listening to at first, and then listen to it 5 times, all right, in a row, and try and find one good thing about it. You should always be able to find something good about it. And I'll tell you this, if you really want to be a good musician and a good artist, if you can't find something good, then you're not doing your job and you're not listening hard enough, all right? There's always something good in art, and remember, art is just self-expression. Off the wall, do you host on Vimeo? I've been doing some specific Vimeo setup that I like to not recreate. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's all about. Sashin, agree with Thierry, longtime student, very genuine and hardworking. Thank you, Sashin. All right, so I'm just trying to see if there's any other big questions here. So yeah, I can only answer so many questions. All right, let's see. Oh, this looks good. All right, as a beginner to maybe intermediate student, would it be better for me to move through the first 15 steps of this plan, practicing in several keys? I can already play all major, minor scales as well as at 140 BPM both hands, or should I progress more quickly through the plan in the key of C alone by avoiding interference between keys? Okay, all right, so when it comes to, that's a great question. I'm glad I found that, Rich. Thank you very much for that. All right, so what you want to do is you want to go through and do this simple bass line, like this one, right? And then like maybe Ben's Blues, right? Something like that, or the No Bowl Guide. You know, you want to do all those bass lines, chords and whatnot, all of that blues in the key of C, right? Don't worry about moving the blues into other keys, right? So that's all in the key of C, because really all you're trying to do is get accompaniment left hand, improvisation right hand, and then just improvising in the key of C, absolutely fine for this stage of the game. Then you want to be focusing on doing all 12 major scales. Your 12 major scales, that's where you're going to be moving into all 12 keys. And then, like I said, Improvisation Essentials, that also moves into all 12 keys as well. So take a look at Improvisation Essentials. That takes you up to step 15. Okay? So if you could play through all 12 major scales and you could do some of those Improvisation Essentials exercises in multiple keys, then you're in good shape, right? Then at that point, then you can continue on with the improvisation over standards. But if you find that improvising in the key of C is difficult, or there's a hang up, right, then I would stay there. Now, if you find that, like, okay, yeah, I can improvise in C, I could play most of my major scales, I haven't done Improv Essentials yet, but I could do most of my major scales, I've improvised a little bit over standards before, then you're likely fine to continue on, right? Then I would just continue on with this course. But this is, like, today's lesson was really just about setting the stage and making it so that anyone who wants to improvise over standards realizes that here's that list. You gotta do that list first. And if you're not gonna do that list first, then don't be surprised when you get frustrated and you kind of fall on your face, moving forward. Doesn't mean you can't learn it. It just means that it's going to be a little bit harder for you and you're probably going to be a little bit frustrated, all right? What will the talk be about tomorrow? Well, you'll have to wait and see. It's kind of a surprise. Tomorrow we will be jumping right into standards. We'll probably be working on easy living first and be talking about what we're going to be doing in the left hand, and then just getting into shelling out our improvisation. I'm also going to be sharing with you scales that you need to know for improvisation, all right? So I've talked about that before. We are going to be talking about that more, and I am going to be doing a course on that, scales for improvisation, or something similar to that, to kind of dovetail on my piano essentials. Because, like I said, like, all right, yeah, you want to know all 12 major scales, but then obviously you want to know all 12 minor scales. You want to kind of know how to form all 12 blues scales, all 12 altered scales, all 12 minor and major pentatonic scales. So all of those scales I need to put together in all 12 keys, and then teach, kind of have some videos showing that in all 12 keys, which that is on the docket, that is on the plan. That's not going to be part of this course, but I will be kind of talking about that as we go, all right? All right. Okay. I'm fond of My Little Pony songs. How should I proceed? Take your My Little Pony songs and start improvising over them. That's what I would say. All right. So I think that's it. I think I answered all of your questions, or at least for most of them. Just seeing if there's anything else. I've only started no bowl piano working at my own pace, as it takes me ages to get things, but I'm improving slowly. All right, perfect. Joe, that's a great place to end. That, as long as you're improving and you feel good about your improvement, then that's exactly it. I'll leave you with this. I studied with Fred Hirsch down in New York for a little time, and one thing he said to me. There are a couple of nice things that I really learned from him. But one thing that always stuck with me is that he said, if you could just learn one new thing a day, that's 365 things, all right? So if, for instance, you didn't know about guide tones yesterday, and now today you look at a lesson and you know what a guide tone is, all right, there you go. Now tomorrow, you learn something else, and you learn something else. So as long as you're getting one little thing, feel good about that. Typically, I'll end with this. This is the biggest problem right here. Belief that you can do it, and understanding that it will take time, and limiting expectations. All right, so this one right here. That is the one that I find that adults have the most trouble with online lessons. That, they don't think that they can improvise. They, don't have the patience. They think that, I should be able to learn it really quick. It takes time, right? And the students that I see that are successful are the ones that just boop, boop, keep working at it, keep chipping away at it, all right? And then also sharing your progress. So I have the No Bowl and the Facebook, JAZZEDGE Facebook groups, all right? Get onto the Facebook groups. Sam posted a comment in here, a question. Sam has been doing a great job. He's been posting stuff onto the Facebook group. I don't remember if you posted anything yet or not, Joe. But, to all of you, post on the group. And it's not about posting to get comments from me. It's posting on there to share with others. And there are two important things that you get from that. Number one, it's a performance vehicle for you, and it's a great way of getting some feedback, right? Number two, you're doing your job as an artist. You're putting art and beauty into the world. And you know what? It's all a community. We're all a community of people who want to learn and get better at music and be able to express ourselves at music, all right? And then so what you're doing is you're helping move that forward, all right? You're doing your part in that. So I applaud all of you that are, putting stuff online, all right, sharing your progress, whether it be on the Facebook group or on your own YouTube channel or in the forum or whatever. I applaud you for doing that, all right? Continue to do that. Continue to join in live. Continue to ask questions. This is the secret sauce, all right? That's it. All right, so anyway, thank you all very much for joining me today. So this is our step-by-step improvisation over standards course. This is the end of lesson 1. Tomorrow I will be back with lesson 2. We have 15 lessons. And like I said, if you're not a member of JAZZEDGE or No Bowl Piano, I'm going to be running some specials here in June. So stay tuned and you'll learn more about that. All right, so thank you all guys for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow.